there are three pieces really that I think that you all should consider in thinking about the way that a presidential candidate like John Edwards can approach Iraq and the way that you all can evaluate plans. The first one is, what is the actual policy that's being proposed? What would our military do? What would our diplomatic structure do? How would we deal with the country, and how would we deal with different stages looking forward? The second one is the domestic political piece. So what is the candidate talking about? What should happen here at home in the relationship between the different branches of government, in what Congress should do, in what the president should do, in what the military should do? And the third one is, what is the candidate's own record? And what have they said, and how have they approached the issue? What's their moral compass on it? And we can talk about all three today. I'll try to get to all of them. If I forget or get confused or swallow up my own hot air, then just get me back on track. But on the first one, it's pretty. We can loop into the domestic politics of it pretty easily, and that's really important because the senators played a really strong role in asking Congress to do what we think they should do. And he's been, well, I'll talk about that first. So he has called for Congress to use its funding power, its constitutional funding power, to deny the president the ability to not follow the will of the American people, which was delivered very, very clearly in the elections last fall. It couldn't have been more clear. Any source you would have looked at, including the American people themselves, said there's a clear recognition among the American people we have to change course now. Okay, the president has very firmly rejected the will of the American people. There's been a lot of kooky things that he said about why, but he has, and John Edwards believes that Congress has constitutionally the power of the purse to enable the military and the commander-in-chief to prosecute certain missions. Congress has that power. He believes they ought to use it. When the Congress this year backed down to the president on the supplemental appropriation that they passed, that would have funded the war with a timetable, he thought they should not have accepted the veto of the president. He thought they ought to just have come back against them over and over and over again, as many times as it took. Because you saw, if you were paying attention to the way the president talked about it, there was, this is my own view of an interpretation of the way that he was talking about it, there was actual recognition of the threat that he wouldn't win in the president's voice when he was talking about it. He needed those funds. And he actually said at one point, he said, if we don't get these monies, we're going to have to go to other sources like training, which I thought was a little odd that he would say that he would obligate funds from somewhere else where they weren't. But he did recognize that Congress had a lot of power. And what happened was Congress backed out, unfortunately. And John Edwards thought they should have just kept going back, right at him, back at him, back at him, back at him, until the president finally understood he couldn't reject the will of the American people. So that's a domestic political piece, and that's where Senator Edwards is. And it's important to know he did vote for the war, as a lot of you know. He authored an op-ed in the Washington Post 2 years ago where the first 3 words were, "I was wrong." And he's been very clear in the way that he's thought about it, the way that he's considered why he voted for the war, what his original reasons for it were, why he believes that he was mistaken, how he's come to the people and expressed that and asked for essentially forgiveness on it. And very importantly, though, he was one of the only senators who had the courage to vote against the $87 billion appropriation that happened a couple of years later. And that's an important piece. So what I'm saying, you got to understand these 3 pieces. What is the policy, what is the domestic politics, and where is the candidate coming from? This compass on this has been clear.